Hacked Pokemon are causing players to get disqualified at the Pokemon World Championship. Let's talk about it. Alright, for those of you that are somehow living under a rock and not aware, the Pokemon World Championship is taking place as we speak in Japan. Now, for the World Championship, you had to have been placing really high, getting enough championship points to be invited to go to the World Championship. Now, there were PC events that were started up later on in the season. However, you have to really do well in the Pokemon Regional Championships. Some of those which I've actually done some videos or posts about saying, hey, I'm going to these Pokemon Regional Championships. But you have to do really, really well, earn enough points that can actually stack up together so you can get enough for an invite so you can go to the World Championship. Now, once you've secured your invite, it is time for you to prepare for the World Championship. This year was a little bit different because they entered in a new regulation called Regulation D, where you can use different Pokemon that were from like the Hisui region from Pokemon Legends Arceus, and some transfer-only Pokemon that were coming in from Pokemon Home. Those became legal to use in the game. So most trainers didn't have any practice in that, so the World Championship is going to be completely new this year by everyone using brand new teams and really seeing how the meta was going to truly develop for the World Championship. However, we have these situations that's going on with players that were caught cheating. Now, some of you may be wondering, how could you even cheat in Pokemon? It's a digital game. Everybody's sitting there watching. How can you actually cheat? Well, actually, you can, because per the rules, you are not allowed to generate your Pokemon into the game. For those of you who have been watching my streams or seeing some of my older videos and things like that, you notice when people are asking me to trade, I'm like, no, I don't really trade. I'll trade some of my Pokemon out. That's totally fine. But I don't usually accept Pokemon because, one, I like to nickname my Pokemon, and two, I want to ensure that my Pokemon are quote-unquote legal, because I don't want anything to be generated in. But this situation here is to where players have been caught with hacked Pokemon. So the Pokemon themselves were generated in. They may have quote-unquote legal stats because their stats are within the parameters of the game. However, the players did not go through the time to get these Pokemon. All they did was use this system. I'm not even sure how the PK Hex or whatever these generators are, or if they get their friends to generate the Pokemon in for them. But I don't even know how the PK Hex is. Matter of fact, let me see. Okay, so I actually just Googled this here just so I can even be fully versed in this, because I always hear about PK Hex, but what my mind always goes to is back to where we used to have like the Game Boy and there was the Game Sharks and stuff. But PK Hex is a software that modifies your Switch. Is it the Switch itself, or it requires a modified Switch running custom firmware and either checkpoint for lower firmwares or higher firmwares. Okay, so I guess it's just some type of software that is going to modify your Switch console to where you can alter the data inside of your game. So, with that being said, we're going to hop into some of these tweets here because of what actually fully transpired. Alright, so our first one that's actually coming out is Brady Smith. Now, there's already this controversy that's going on about between him and Wolf Glick. I'm not going to hop into all of that. What we're basically talking about is that he was disqualified at 2-0, and 3 of those Pokemon were generated from a friend of his. So we hop on over to his actual Twitter page and we see the official post where he's stating this. And as we hop through here, we see that people are asking, how do they know what happened? What's going on? He's like, he doesn't really fully understand what's actually transpiring. He didn't have any options to go through Legends Arceus, so he couldn't get, for example, his Landorus. That's one of his legendaries that he needed to get generated in. Which threw some red flags even for me, because I'm just like, there are the older games, and there are multiple older games in which, if you've been playing for a number of years, you should have access to these mons. So if you don't have these Pokemon, usually if you're asking somebody, hey, can you send me a legendary, that's a very specific thing to be asking for. It's not like they can say, oh, I can go and catch this Pokemon because it's exclusive into my game, and I'll go ahead and catch this for you because you can't catch it in yours. It's a legendary, so therefore it's probably just one that you can get in your game. So usually people don't really want to typically part with those, even though they say, oh, I have a really good friend. A really good friend means somebody that can possibly generate the Pokemon in. That is one huge red flag for me. But I went ahead and dug through a rabbit hole. And let me show you something what else I found. Size matters. Love the name. So this individual is saying that when one person say, oh, why you need to expose the merchant, but Size Matter actually responds here and states that it was their friend who traded them for free. And actually, apparently, was actually a really good friend because the person transferred legit Pokemon. Grimmsnarl, Landorus, and Urshifu. And they said Brady modified those three. They were legit to begin with. And then Brady modified them. He knew what he was doing, that he took that risk. So that is going to hop into a very questionable thing. Because the way how accessible the game is nowadays in terms of how you can up your stats. We'll talk about lowering stats. That can be a little bit of an issue. But in terms of upping stats, because if we're talking about, like, for example, Landorus, if that was one of the Pokemon that were caught as modified, you send it in from your friend, okay. If you want to change it to an Adamant Nature, you go and grab a mint. You go literally to the store, grab an Adamant Mint, change it to Adamant. Now this here brings up a major question as into why would he even modify him if he got these Pokemon and that's what all he needed. So let's hop into the PokePaste real quick so we can compare everything to make sure this all actually makes sense. So here is the PokePaste from Brady talking about the team that he was actually using for the tournament. Now we see we have the Grimmsnarl, which is running a Terra-type Fire. So nothing that's really, the only thing that's really a challenge to get would be the Terra-type. Then we have the Urshifu Rapid Strike. So that's one of the other mons that were sent. And Terra-type is Water. Adamant Nature. Normal stat investments, we're not really worried about any type of IV lowering situations. Because IV lowering situations, those are a whole different thing. But let's take a look at the Landorus. Let's make sure it wasn't a rare special Landorus. Nope. So this is an Adamant Nature physical attacking Landorus with 252 HP, 36 attack. The main reason I wanted to look into this stuff first is because these Pokemon do not require anything Hexy, minus, I guess, maybe your Terra-type. Because if you wanted to, sometimes people will look into like zero speed IV type Pokemon for Trick Room. None of these Pokemon were really worried about that. And Grimmsnarl just uses his Prankster ability, so we're not even worried about that. These individuals are saying that they sent in these Pokemon as a legit. Why would he then modify them? And that would be more than likely because of the Terra-types, because it is very difficult to get these Terra-types. I am currently grinding my butt right now through these Blissey raids because of the special event that's going on right now to try to get even more Terra Shards. So it is definitely not fun per se, but it's definitely easier while these specialty raids are going on, which will lead us into how people are commenting about this whole situation. All right, here we have some people that are going like kind of back and forth here, where that high def guy is talking about that's against the spirit of the game. Either put the work in for good mods or don't play. You should be rewarded for putting work in rather than taking the lazy route. While another person say, what if competitive battling is the only avenue of the game you enjoy though? Competitive battling, the standard playthrough of a campaign, and the functional sandbox of post-game team building are effectively three different games, and not everyone enjoys all of them. Which, yes, that is true. Because sometimes I play through the story of Pokemon, sometimes it can be boring, but honestly, I will say that Scarlet and Violet, to me, had one of the best storylines. I will go ahead and say that. But most people, they don't want to play necessarily the storyline. They just want to get to the battling factor, and I like to play competitive Pokemon, so that is the thing. However, the challenge is that you have to go through the entire game. There's times I've actually had to restart my entire game in one of my other files because I have multiple copies, and I will go through the entire thing because I needed to get, for example, additional Ruin Pokemon. I have in my Violet game all the other Ruin Pokemon, and I'm planning on changing their natures and things like that, so they can be kind of different to the Ruin Pokemon that I have currently in my Scarlet game. Because honestly, to go and change their Terra types are going to be far too difficult and time consuming for something that may or may not even work out well. And what do I mean by that? When you're playing with Pokemon, you're going into, for example, you're going to Pokemon Showdown, and you'll test out these Pokemon and with the different Terra types to see how things work. However, whenever you go onto the ranked battles in Pokemon on the actual game, you sometimes actually find out that your team is not working out as well as you thought it would, as it was doing on the ladder. So with that, then you suddenly say, oh my gosh, did I really mess up? Could my Terra type have been different? But that ends up becoming a risk in terms of trying to change that Terra type, because it's a very time consuming process just to get 50 Terra shards. Because a standard Pokemon will maybe give you maybe 7, 8 of these Terra shards. In order for you to get 50, you have to find that specific type, that high of a star count raid, and then make sure you beat them, because some of them are kind of cheesy. Then after you do that, get enough of those Terra shards. It's probably a good couple hour process. Then you change your Terra type, then you start the testing process, and then you see if it even works. It's very time consuming. I do understand that factor of what people are actually saying, to where it is very difficult and the time is very consuming in terms of trying to do that. Just like how this person here is saying, I love how the anti-gen people act like breeding and prepping mons is some hidden technology that nobody knows about. The only skill required to get legitimate mons is time. Competitive games should be balanced around actual skillful play and not how much time you spent building. And then this other person is then responding, breeding, raising is a skill, to be fair. I've seen plenty of people mess up, settle for less than perfect stats, moves, just because they couldn't be bothered or mess something up. Y'all have seen me grinding on some of my even shiny hunts, and just because before we could even change their nature, I would reset on a shiny legendary just because it didn't have the right nature. Now that has been altered, it kind of hurts a little bit that I've reset my shiny legendary so many times, but I'm glad that they made the change. The Pokemon Company has in fact put in enough changes in order for us to be able to make all of our Pokemon more competitive. Minus, again, I'm saying it again, minus the shards. Also, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Zero IV. Now, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we have people that want to have zero speed IVs in order to make sure that their Pokemon is as slow as possible to get the maximum benefit for Trick Room. And also, you sometimes have these Pokemon that you want to have with a high special attack and as low as possible attack, so they don't get hurt with a powerful foul play from their opponent. Now, these things are very niche, and we have the bottle caps that we can maximize our stats. So they still have not given us, for example, like me and some of my friends have been talking about, well, what if they actually created this thing called like the bronze bottle cap or something, and that will actually reduce one of your stats down to 0 on your IVs. That'll be something that'll be kind of interesting if they were to implement. But nonetheless, it is more difficult to do that on a legendary, especially if you're saying like, oh, I don't have access to this Pokemon. I need somebody to go ahead and send it to me. Boom. Well, you're going to get what you get. You can't reset for that. So it is what it is. But if you're going to now complain saying, hey, no, I just didn't have time for it and I'm having other people send it to me, then we have a bit of a problem that you're complaining that you didn't spend the time to going for these Pokemon. For all of you that know me, you all know I do not like to generate my Pokemon. I do not participate in that. I like to just find my Pokemon, really grind them out, and do everything. Ever since I had the robbery that happened back in 2020, that was a very hard blow that I had experienced. It was very unfortunate that we did not have a backup system for me to actually get my Pokemon back or anything like that. So that's something I'm still even rebuilding on. And I'm taking that time out to do that. Now, for those of you who have also seen that I've gone to these competitions, it does make me a little bit upset, I would say, to find out that most individuals are in fact genning their Pokemon, because I'm taking the time out to go through all of the grinding process to get these Pokemon. And then I go to these competitions and they have something that was just generated in. So that makes it very difficult for me as a competitor, because I myself am using what I got, bringing the Pokemon that I worked hard for and brought them to the competition, while they're getting something that's just generated in. It's not really the same equal balance of play. And we all know that that was something that was against the rules. Just how much against the rules is where things kind of got into a little bit of a gray area, because they're like, oh, if it's just legal stats, okay, well, it's fine. Or is it? But now, of course, when you go into Japan, where the world competition, modifying your game is illegal, like full on illegal. You get arrested and you have, like, you can get jail time, big fines for all of that. So going there with these modifications is a huge, huge deal. So the fact that they're now cracking down on this is very good, but at the same time it is kind of concerning, because Pokemon is also a game based upon trading. So it's a trading card game. It's the trading game to where you can make sure you can catch them all. If this is the spirit of the game, and we have all these functionalities of, for example, of our group Terra Raid battles and things like that, the question then becomes, what is legal, what is not legal? For example, if you are just participating in a online raid, you see a Pokemon like, oh my gosh, there's a 5-star Scizor, Terra type water. I don't have to worry about going for all these water Terra shards. There's one out there. Boom, I'm going to get it. You hop in onto this Terra raid that was online, you jump into it, you catch the Scizor, boom. So you still have to train these Pokemon. I mean, they're not maximized or anything like that. What if the source of that Terra raid was one of those bots? And then you don't know, you just hopped onto one of these free open raids, and then you go to these competitions. Will that be something that will flag you? If that's something that flags you, you have literally no idea that that is an issue. And that was something that you were looking for, is a Terra type water Scizor. You know, that's just an example. So we don't know the full spectrum of what is the full legalities, and there needs to be a way that we can start checking our Pokemon to ensure that if you have in fact participated in any of these raids or things like that, we want to ensure that that is not something that can penalize you. Because if you're just participating in the open function of the game, you don't want that to then come back and randomly just hurt you, saying, hey, yeah, that Pokemon that was hacked in. Like, I don't know. Only thing that you've done was participate in raids. If you're getting these random 6 IV best Pokemon in a random trade, then those are a little bit easier to tell that those are more than likely hacked in. But nonetheless, even with these 6 and 7-star raids, you can get a lot more of these max 6 IV Pokemon here lately. So don't jump the gun and say, oh, I cannot get that. That's definitely hacked, but it's leading more towards it. So you want to go ahead and check where it came from, and that way you can possibly see if it came from a Terra raid or if it was just something found in the wild. If it's just something randomly found in the wild with 6 max stats, highly, 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 highly unlikely, especially if it has all these ribbons and things like that. But there's still all these different gray areas that I think we need to have implemented to ensure that all of the players that are playing the game legitimately are going to be protected. They're not penalized if they're going to one of these competitions and next you know a hashtag suddenly saying, hey, this Pokemon was generated in a Terra raid battle that from one of those bot things, while you actually have no idea that that was even the case. So I think there needs to be a little bit more implementation for that. But aside from that, honestly, I believe that all competitors really need to work on getting their own Pokemon. and stop cheating the game. It is not really fair that you're saying, oh, I'm the best player in the world. I got the world championship here, but a Pokemon was generated in. So you're, playing on Pokemon Showdown, running some more tests, while your opponent there is still grinding to find that same Pokemon that you're testing with. After you got all of your testing, then you call somebody and say, hey, I need this type of Pokemon. Oh, yeah, I got you. They trade it on to you because you've been practicing with it, while your opponent is over there finally catching their Pokemon with the right stats that they need. And then they put it on their team. That's hours of practice that they've lost just catching the Pokemon. So, but in reality, it's not really that the hours of practice that they lost. It's hours of practice that you gained by hacking the system. You had a friend that actually did that, and that gives you an unfair advantage because they are trying to do it more legitimately, while you are just saying, oh yeah, I'm testing it. Hey, somebody send this over to me. Boom, I got what I need. We should all be able to play on the same field, play it truly competitively, but in the art of Pokemon, you're saying, I'm bringing the Pokemon that I got. I got these Pokemon, captured them, and I'm raising them to the best of my ability because this Pokemon I found in the wild, I've soft reset it over it for like 10, 15, 20 times to get it as low as I can for certain stats, etc., etc., etc. You did it, boom. And this is the Pokemon that you brought to the competition. That's what you had. Not that, hey, yeah, my buddy just sent this over to me, they genned it in, yeehaw. Unless, if they want to turn like Pokemon, and honestly, Pokemon cannot say that, hey, you guys have Pokemon Showdown if you want to go ahead and practice. Because Pokemon Showdown is not from the TCPI. It's not from the Pokemon Company. It is not from Game Freak. It is something that was made by other individuals, which we are so thankful for that service and that the opportunity that is free. But honestly, if the Pokemon Company does not want to invest in that, then that is a shame on the Pokemon Company itself. The Pokemon Company should actually create something of that sort. And honestly, if they want to create something to where people can generate those Pokemon through there and just send it into their game, that might be one thing. Or we just do create the Pokemon in their new Pokemon Company Showdown type of thing, but it plays out in a very high definition, like Sword and Shield graphic type of thing. Granted, that might reduce their sales in the game, which I think that might be the concern. So maybe if you have to have the copy of the game in order for you to be allowed to have that access, maybe that might be a thing. I'm not sure how they want to do that, but nonetheless, it is a very sensitive situation. But honestly, if it's against the rules to gen in your Pokemon, don't gen in your Pokemon. Don't be calling your friends and say, hey, trade me this Pokemon real quick. It's just not right. It's not fair to your opponents while you're saying I'm playing on this high competitive level when you say, but I didn't have time to get the Mons. If you don't have the time to get the Mons, then use the Mons you got and show me your skill. If you don't have the skill with that, then by all means, it is what it is. So part of it is the sacrifice of time. I'm a traveling nurse. I work 13 plus hour shifts. My work days are excessive. My days off, I have to be doing a lot of planning and things like that. And I try to stream and send out content, things of that sort. And I really try to make everything as, up to par as I possibly can. There's some of my streams where I'm just getting bodied when I'm even doing some BGC battles. And that is because that's what I was like, oh man, I thought this was going to work, but it just doesn't. But that's part of the game. But if you're trying to say, I'm going to be the best in the world, you have to show that you're the best by not cheating the system. Because honestly, if you're going to be the best in the world, you can't cheat. Simple and easy. But that's just my take on it. Let me know what your takes are. And hopefully more people are not going to be continued to get disqualified. Those that made it past the first day with like one or two that were removed from their team, then they by day 2, they can actually change their team up and get some new Pokemon on there. So that gives them opportunity to reclaim some of these mons, which they kind of should have already done previously. And or, I'm not sure what happens on the finals, but we'll see how that goes. But nonetheless, I just hope that this all just sheds some light on the whole situation. And hopefully this is also addressed formally to where it's more clear cut, more information is brought up about it, and ways how we can solve it, and also how we can protect individuals that are unaware of them obtaining Pokemon that are illegal, especially if they're trying to use it, especially for these very difficult to obtain Terra Shards or Terra types for certain Pokemon. But that's just my take. Let me know what your takes are. Hope you all enjoyed this video. More things to come here in the nearby future. But this is going to be the Rayquaza signing off. You all know what to do. You stay strong and you power on. Catch y'all later.